Honestly, it was a good childhood. I will not sit here and say it wasn't. It was a good childhood. It was easy. There was enough adequate space for kids to play, to express themselves, to be everything they needed to be. It was adventurous. It was safe. And actually, I look back and I realize how safe it was. Because you would just leave the house. Unarudi 6.
There are no fences.
When the lights were coming on, this is, you don't even remember to go and eat lunch because you guys have gone out and played and had fun and enjoyed. I enjoyed my childhood. Right now, Kenya is looking at, we're number 3 in the world with teenage pregnancies. And even on looking at it, I'm thinking, I got pregnant 26 years ago when I was 15, right? It was ridiculous then. It is worse now. Wow. Where is the disconnect?
So you have not progressed.
Things haven't, they've gone worse. I was an anomaly. It wasn't a common thing for a teenager to get pregnant, right? But now it is a common thing for a teenager to have a child. That is wrong.
I think last week I saw a ranking in terms of counties, like which counties have more.
It's shameful. It's not a conversation we should be having as a nation. Yeah. It's a very shameful thing that we are talking about. 15, 16, 12-year-olds who are getting married. I've just come from a meeting and I was looking at those statistics and people in Kajiado that way were talking about how 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds are wives. And I'm like, we are in 2023. This is not something we should be talking about, but it is happening.
They're still children, yeah.
Njeri, when talking about her childhood, talked about how children were safer then, and how one of the indicators of that was the fact that teenage pregnancy was rare. I'm wondering how true this is. Was your childhood safer, or were you just a child and so you didn't know how truly messed up the world is? Because Njeri's an adult now. Worse, she's one who works with victims of abuse who are disproportionately women and children. And as she says in her own words, she sees evil.
I feel like I see evil.
Of course, the world looks less safe for children than it did when she was a child. But maybe it's just because you was a baby then, just running around, fishing and stealing fruit from people's trees. I really don't believe the world was safer then for children than it is now. If anything, I think that some of our beliefs about children have really improved. I mean, culturally, children were valuable because they were workers. Fewer people now think of children like that. Beating children was a no-brainer. Now, even parents who still believe in the rod likely pause and reconsider. Even better, a not insignificant number of people are turning away from beating children altogether. I suspect that what's happening here is a mix of growing up and being forced to see the world's horrors, as well as perhaps the fact that it's reported on more now than before. So in the past, we weren't actively tracking things like the number of teenage pregnancies, and now we are. I suspect another factor at play is declinism. Declinism is one of the many cognitive biases we are susceptible to as humans. It describes our tendency to see the past in an overly positive light and to view the present or future in an overly negative light. I can only find one study with data on the trends of teenage pregnancy in Kenya. Unfortunately, its data is only from 2003 to 2014, but it'll have to do. In 2003, 42% of women reported having their first pregnancy between ages 15 and 19. By 2014, only 38.9% of women reported having a child between ages 15 and 19. Another study by UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, found that teenage pregnancy rates were 18% in 2014 and had dropped to 15% in 2022. Consider the fact that just a few decades ago, child marriage was normal. Now it's something people do secretly. Things were not better in the past for women and children. They were not. Think about the story Mutemi himself supplies about his childhood and the way boys treated girls. The unremarkable ease with which primary school boys raped girls.
I remember growing up in Muranga, part of my upper primary school, and the culture was kutongoza, like tuning a girl was not there. So you'll be going home after primary school, and as a guy wants to have sex with, and the up country starts quite early, and they just drag the girl into the bush. And that was seen as normal, even by the girls, because that was a tradition.
Yeah.
In what way was that world better for girls? He describes that as a normal, ordinary thing. Now, even if it happened, it would not be brushed off as normal. It would not go without being remarked upon by someone. Later in the show, he talks about similar incidents happening in a low-income neighborhood where gangs of men would just drag women into houses and rape them if they were outside after sunset.
There was an incident of abuse in Mukuru slums, and you're talking with some of the guys who are working there. and we were exploring how the men, the protectors of the women were being, sexually abused, and it's a lot of this gang culture and gang violence, and a girl could not safely like walk through Mukulu home without being dragged into one or the other house, and that's normalized.
Note the difference. In the first story, his childhood story, it was just ordinary boys, teenage boys raping girls. Now, fast forward a few decades later, and that behavior is being attributed to gangs. Something that was so normal that schoolboys did it is now classified as gang behavior. Society has changed. Our views have changed and made it a slightly better world for women and girls. All the protections we have now didn't exist then, from prosecution for domestic violence to things like banning of corporal punishment in schools, not to mention things like being allowed to inherit and open bank accounts without a man's cosign. Child marriages were normal, and their demonization is only a recent development. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, women around the world were often married at an early age, usually soon after reaching puberty. In many ancient and medieval societies, it was common for girls to be betrothed at or even before the age of puberty. In recent years, child marriage has been decreasing in prevalence in most parts of the world. UNICEF data from 2018 showed that about 21% of young women worldwide, that's aged 20 to 24, were married as children. This shows a 25% decrease from just 10 years ago, 10 years prior to that. Consider this UNICEF study tracking changes in child marriage between 2000 and 2019. Even the way people talk about it has changed. People used to say early marriage as recently as 2004, 2007. Now, child marriage is a common way to refer to it. Also, child marriage could lead someone to think it affects boys the same as girls. False. The most recent study in 2019 echoes the findings of a comprehensive 2005 study confirming that child marriage rates are significantly higher for girls than for boys, with 1 in 5 girls being married as a child globally compared to 1 in 21 boys.
Right now, Kenya is looking at, we are number 3 in the world with teenage pregnancies. And if you're not looking at it, I'm thinking, I got pregnant 26 years ago when I was 15, right? It was ridiculous then. It is worse now.
Wow.
Where is the disconnect?
So you have not like progressed.
Things haven't, they've gone worse. I was an anomaly. It wasn't a common thing for a teenager to get pregnant, right? But now it is a common thing for a teenager to have a child. That is wrong.
Njeri gave an example about how teenage pregnancy was a rare occurrence then, as one of the indicators that children were safer, which is why I chose to focus on child marriage rates to show that children were not safer and teenage pregnancy was not rarer then. So, were children really safer in the past? I don't think so. I think we've just grown up, our values have changed, and so the media is reporting on it more. Plus, there's that pesky declinism bias to deal with. When it comes to women and children, the world is still hella fucked. I mean, it's proper fucked, but it's better. Slow as the progress may be. I know I wouldn't choose to live in any other timeline as a woman. I shudder to think of it. This nostalgia for the past comes up again when we talk about how we no longer have difficult conversations with children and young people.
And then, of course, you can have that conversation,
Yes,
because I think us and our parents, I think when we moved from the traditionals into modernity,
yes,
we lost that ability to have those
conversations. Yeah.
Because then rite of passage, circumcision, that's the time you either go with your aunties, your grandmothers, your uncles and grandfathers, and have those
cultural rights
and those conversations into, adulthood and that kind of thing.
And I think that is something we really need to talk about coming back to.
They talk about how in the past we had these cultural rites and practices like circumcision and so on that ensured young people at the very least were informed about things like sex and so on. That may be the case. Still, I'm glad we no longer have those structures in place. In a patriarchal society, those sorts of rights only reinforce existing hierarchies and views. I would never send my kid there. I'm convinced those circumcision places are where young boys are filled even more with dangerous misogynistic views shrouded under seemingly harmless things like, you're a man now, a man is a leader, etc. Nah, you are not teaching my kid any of that. Recently, I watched a Vice documentary called Marriage at 14, Zambia's Child Brides. In this documentary, this child is being married off. And do you know what they do? They do the traditional rituals where older women advise her about marriage and what's expected of you, etc. Do you know what they tell this 14-year-old baby?
The very first thing they teach a girl who is going to get married is how to respect your husband, because men are so particular about respect. It's very, very important in this tradition. That's why they would never ever allow a girl to enter marriage or to be taken to her husband before she passes through this process.
And how do they think how she's doing?
She's
ready. What were you doing here in the hut for the past 30 days? So what are you expecting your life gonna be like? What did they teach you?
Aloma kanoja bintu nenozomera noja chintu nenozomera ngakupeti vao kutoka kuita uta fast kupusa vinya chakulya nokuachitira vonsa lume kutaziwe.
What do you think about having a child or being pregnant?
Kubala kupunzisa aliyanipunzisa mawanga kubala.
What did you do before the 30 days?
Ku school nzopunza kuberenga.
How to respect her husband, because men are apparently very particular about respect. We all know respect just means blind obedience and deference. How to satisfy him sexually when he comes home and not just lie there. And then your usual selling him, cooking, cleaning, and the usual slaving away women are required to engage in. I would prefer to live in a world where none of those people ever got the chance to so much as look in the direction of my child. This is what the past was like for so many people. This is what the present is like for far too many women and children. There's no value in looking back longingly at patriarchal institutions that had enslaving women as their primary ethos, as their backbone. The past wasn't better for women and girls, and it certainly wasn't safer. Let that thought go. Let it go. Let it go.
Guys, yeah, ask a man what a good woman is or the qualities of a good woman and watch him describe a slave. Watch this man describe a slave. This man, rubbish, release us.